Brian Hooker's attorney says his client completely broke down. He burst into tears during the questioning conducted earlier today. The defense insists that Hooker denies any kind of responsibility, while the operation to locate Lynette Hooker continues without pause. 11 days. That's exactly how long Lynette has been missing in the treacherous waters of the Abaco Island. It's been 11 days since her husband walked into the Marsh Harbour boatyard, around 4 in the morning on April 5th, to report that she had vanished. 11 days since he told police she fell overboard. 11 days since this desperate search began. In that time, the search has been anything but passive or quiet. The United States Coast Guard assigned aircraft to the operation immediately. Bahamian authorities launched vessels to comb every open water sector that was relevant to the case. Multiple teams have walked the shorelines on foot. The Royal Bahamas Defence Force coordinated movements throughout the Abaco Islands, specifically near Elbow Cay. They searched near Marsh Harbour along the entire coastline across sandbars and the small cays scattered throughout that part of the Caribbean. Investigators have scoured the water, the air, and the land. After 11 days of massive effort, they've found only a single item belonging to Lynette Hooker. Tonight we'll break down what that item was, its exact location, and what experts believe this discovery reveals. We'll also look at what rescue teams are searching for today, now that Brian Hooker has been released, and says he'll head out to sea to look for his wife on his own. I want us to be very clear about the nature of this video and what we intend to lay out. Lynette Hooker has not been found. The title of this piece is a question because people keep asking, and today we're going to give a real answer. It will be a thorough, source-based answer about what was actually found, what it means, and where investigators are now focusing their attention. Absolutely, every piece of information mentioned here comes from official sources who are named on the record. If a piece of information comes from a single media outlet, we'll tell you so with complete transparency. When we're sharing an analytical inference, that is our reading of the evidence, we'll say so explicitly. We are not declaring anyone guilty here. The investigation is still moving through its legal process. We followed this case in detail, and we know you've been with us every step of the way. Today, we'll review the full scope of the search. We'll examine the resources, the single confirmed finding, and a dramatic shift in how authorities are officially defining what they're looking for. That shift didn't come with a big press conference or scandalous headlines. Nobody stepped in front of the cameras to announce it, but that change alters everything about the future of this criminal investigation. We'll make sure you understand exactly what it means. A quick note before we dig into the details. Everything presented here is based on official sources on the record. If a piece of information comes from only one outlet, we'll let you know. Analytical inferences will be flagged as such. To repeat, this video does not accuse any person of guilt. The case remains open. Let's now talk about the search operation. Let's start by understanding what the official search has looked like. Scale matters because grasping the size of the deployment explains why the lack of findings is so unsettling. The Royal Bahamas Defence Force has been leading coordination since the early morning of April 5th. That was when Brian Hooker had his first contact with law enforcement at the Marsh Harbour boatyard. The U.S. Coast Guard joined shortly after bringing high-tech aerial search equipment. These are aircraft capable of monitoring enormous stretches of ocean, something ground or surface teams simply cannot do. Bahamian patrols used boats to inspect the surface of the designated zone, while personnel walked the coast step by step. Commander Origen Delavoye of the Royal Bahamas Defence Force spoke officially with NBC and confirmed that the search is continuing. He also confirmed a key operational point. Bad weather seriously hampered rescue efforts in the days immediately after Lynette's disappearance. This detail is far more significant than it might seem at first glance. Bad weather at sea isn't just an inconvenience for rescuers. It's a psychological and physical variable that changes everything. High winds and rough seas wipe out aerial visibility and make it extremely difficult for surface vessels to navigate. These factors alter currents and water flow, which determines where anything, an object or a drifting person, ends up. If Lynette went into the water between the night of April 4th and the early hours of April 5th, her fate was shaped by the weather. The conditions in the days that followed directly affected the drift of any trace connected to her. It even affected the team's ability to enter certain specific areas of the search zone. The geography of the search centered on the waters of Elbow Cay and Marsh Harbour. The Abacos are a complex system of barrier islands. The terrain ranges from shallow sandbars to very deep water channels, with some areas exposed to the open ocean and others sheltered. Parts of the coast are reachable by beach, but others can only be accessed by boat. Small cays dot the entire area. Some are nothing but sand and solitude, while others have only the bare basics for survival. Searching terrain like this demands constantly shifting strategy. You can't navigate a boat in water that's barely a foot and a half deep. Forget landing a helicopter on a strip of rock where there isn't a single clear space to maneuver. The terrain is so treacherous that not even the largest, most expensive operation could cover every corner at the same time. It's impossible to be everywhere at once. Commander Delavoye officially confirmed that rescue efforts are continuing. That means that as of the latest report received, state efforts have not been called off. The search is active at this very moment. 11 days have passed. 11 days of aerial patrols, boats combing the sea, and teams walking the shorelines, and in all that time, only one object has surfaced. The fact that the U.S. Coast Guard deployed aerial units is a detail that shouldn't be overlooked. It carries real weight. They don't send aircraft into foreign waters just because an American citizen goes missing. It doesn't work that simply. Moving those resources depends on available information treaties between countries, and above all, how they assess the seriousness of the incident. Their persistence on the case, combined with the criminal investigation their intelligence arm has opened, makes it clear there's a real deep interest in finding Lynette, and above all in understanding what the hell actually happened. A federal agency doesn't operate like this in a routine missing persons case. And that brings us to the single discovery. Let's talk now about the only piece of physical evidence confirmed so far. The details are crucial, but the way we learned about them is just as revealing. Brian Hooker left a voicemail for Carly Allsworth, Lynette's daughter. CBS News obtained that recording and made it public. I found the life ring I threw to your mom when she fell in the water. And well, that's it. They still haven't found her. In the audio, Brian addresses Carly in his own words. He opens by saying, "Hey, sweetie. I just got a call from the Hopetown rescue team. They found the life ring I threw to your mom when she went into the water." It's Brian's voice confirming two key points to Lynette's daughter. One, that the local rescue team found something at sea. And two, that the object was the life ring itself. The same object Brian claims he threw to his wife at the moment she disappeared beneath the waves. For its part, the Hopetown rescue team independently confirmed to the press that they did indeed recover a life ring in the area. The evidence comes from two separate fronts: Brian's voice, in that message to Carly, and the official statement from local authorities. It's a data point corroborated by multiple sources. Period. But now we have to look very carefully at what this means, and more importantly, what it doesn't mean. It means a life ring was pulled from the water in the search area. And it means that, as of today, it is the only physical trace linked to Lynette Hooker that has surfaced since all of this began 11 days ago. It tells us that the one device Brian says he threw to his wife to save her, the very thing she was supposed to hold on to in order to survive, turned up drifting alone. Alone. Without her, what no one has said publicly is the exact spot where it was found, or how far it drifted from where she supposedly went into the water. We also don't know what physical condition the life ring was in when it was recovered, let alone what experts have concluded, after cross-referencing that location with the patterns of the ocean currents in the area. Investigators are keeping that information under lock and key. That's standard when it comes to an open criminal investigation. But there's a harsh reality that can't be ignored. The life ring turned up, but Lynette still shows no signs of life. Stop and think for a moment about what that implies within the story Brian Hooker has told. He says Lynette fell into the water in the middle of the night. He says he threw her the life ring. He says he tried desperately to find her. According to his account, he then sailed to the Marsh Harbour port to report her disappearance around 4 in the morning. If we follow his story, the life ring was left in the water, right in the area where she would have gone under. Rescuers with their planes, boats, and coastal patrols found the object. But of her, not a trace. They found the equipment, but not the human being it was meant to save. And this is where the technical analysis of this discovery comes in. At sea, when a floating object turns up, experts perform something called a drift analysis. It's pure maritime forensic science. They factor in the currents, wind, strength, and wave conditions at that precise moment. With the time elapsed, experts reconstruct the path backwards to calculate the exact spot where the object entered the water. If the life ring appeared in a location that doesn't match Brian's version of where his wife went in, if the natural drift of the sea completely contradicts the point of entry he described, That contradiction becomes weighty evidence. It doesn't solve the case on its own, but it raises very dark questions. Drift analysis typically deals with complex variables and certain margins of error, but it's still an essential scientific tool for investigators. The exact location of that life ring, compared with the account Brian Hooker gave, is something experts will have examined under a microscope. There's another angle on that flotation device that hasn't been discussed publicly: the condition it was recovered in. Was it intact? Did it show signs that someone had clung to it? Did it look the way you'd expect an object to look after a person had been floating with it in the ocean? These are critical questions that a forensic examination of the object could eventually answer. What investigators found when they inspected it is something we don't know right now. We only know clearly that they found it. And in the middle of an investigation, police generally don't publicize the results of their forensic analyses. For those running the case, the discovery of that life ring likely generated as many new questions as it did certainties. The tally of 11 days of massive search efforts by air, sea, and land comes down to this one single recovered object. A single piece that belonged to Lynette Hooker, and it turned up floating alone without her on the night everything happened. Before digging deeper into the investigation, we need to outline with total precision the version of events that Brian Hooker provided. Understanding his version is the foundation for everything. It's the template against which police measure every new lead that surfaces. According to what has been disclosed from his statements to authorities and the media, he and Lynette were on their boat near the Abaco Islands during the night of April 4th, stretching into the early morning of April 5th. At some point in those early morning hours, she fell into the water. He maintains that he tried to rescue her. He says he threw her a life ring, the same one that was later recovered days afterward by the Hopetown search and rescue team. He insists he tried to locate her in the darkness of the sea, but his efforts were useless. He simply couldn't find her. He then set course for the Marsh Harbour boatyard. He arrived around 4 in the morning, and that's when he notified the authorities. That's his story. And now investigators are working to confirm or disprove every single one of his words. What exact time did it happen? What were the precise coordinates when she fell? What was the sea doing at that moment? How far did the boat drift from the point where she went in? How long was he really searching before deciding to head back to dry land? What was the first thing he said to the people who met him at the boatyard? What was his demeanor? Did he seem desperate or unusually calm? What condition was the boat in when police inspected it? Were there any witnesses to his arrival? What was visibility like at that hour? Were his clothes dry? Was there any detail on deck that didn't match what he had described minutes earlier? What do his call text and GPS records say about those critical hours? These kinds of questions are the engine of any maritime investigation. It's not just about the big picture, it's about reconstructing events minute by minute and cross-checking them against every available piece of data. Devices, witnesses, physical evidence, nautical logs, weather buoys, everything counts. Even the condition of what the sea gives back. Here's a detail that deserves a careful look: the boatyard. Brian Hooker didn't call police from the water. He didn't radio for help while he was searching, and he didn't dial 911 the moment she disappeared beneath the waves. He piloted the boat to the Marsh Harbour boatyard, and only there around 4 in the morning did he report the disappearance. That gap in time between the alleged fall and the report is a thread investigators are going to pull hard on. How long does it actually take to sail from the point of the alleged incident to that boatyard? Does that travel time match the hours stated? We aren't inventing answers, only pointing out the gaps police have to close. We're focusing on the questions framing this case because his testimony is the starting point of this entire puzzle. Every piece of forensic evidence, every digital data point, and every witness statement will inevitably be measured against his version. It's a fact that police have seized several electronic devices belonging to Brian Hooker as part of the process. The exact list of those devices has not been fully detailed in press reports so far. In a maritime incident involving an American citizen in international waters, cell phones are a goldmine for the investigation. But nautical GPS units, the boat's navigation, computers, and any radio communication equipment are also examined. All of that is evidence that can reveal where the boat was, where it was headed, and when, with second-by-second precision. On the release of Brian Hooker and his public statement, Brian Hooker was initially arrested on suspicion in connection with Lynette's disappearance, but he was released shortly afterward. His legal representative, Terrell Butler, has remained firm and consistent in his media appearances. Brian flatly denies any involvement in a crime, That is his official legal stance, and he isn't moving off of it. That is exactly what his defense has placed on the official record of the case. As we do with every verified piece of information, we need to make something very clear. Brian Hooker flatly denies having had anything to do with his wife's fate. He has not been convicted of any crime, not a single ruling against him. He remains under scrutiny, in an investigation that hasn't paused, but after being released, what has really shaken things up isn't just his attorney's strategy. It's his own words, what he himself said in front of the cameras. Shortly after regaining his freedom, Hooker decided to break his silence with CBS News. "I've been told that people survive in the Bahamas after falling into the sea," he said. "For days, even entire weeks. There are too many islands. Sandbars everywhere, small cays scattered across the blue." He pressed the point he'd been assured, that surviving a fall into the ocean is possible, that time isn't an absolute death sentence. He spoke of the geography as an ally: islets, sandbars, cays, and small strips of land, where someone could take shelter. He painted himself as a man trapped in anguish. He said he simply couldn't turn away and forget everything even if he tried. Right. His attorney Terrell Butler was firm on this, for Brian finding his wife remains the only real priority. But let's examine the weight of those statements. In cases like this, words don't travel in just one direction, they hit several fronts at the same time. Hooker is shouting to the world that Lynette might still be breathing, keeping alive a hope that many question. People need to hear it straight from your mouth. Do you really believe Lynette is still alive today? "I believe it," he let out with a heavy sigh, as if carrying the weight of the world. He mentioned that he knew the Abacos well. The islands, the sandbars, that whole natural maze surrounding the tragedy. Those cays are, according to him, potential refuges. He's selling himself to the public as the devoted husband who refuses to throw in the towel. That narrative has a clear purpose. It's key on the legal front, a suspect who, in front of everyone, insists they keep searching for his wife. He keeps alive the idea that she's still out there. He projects hope, a constant concern aimed at drawing empathy. Investigators are taking note of every gesture. This stance also deeply influences how the case is perceived. What's curious is that the places he describes, islands, sandbars, cays, are the very ones that rescue teams have already combed meter by meter. That precision in describing the area, linking it directly to survival, opens up a box of rather uncomfortable questions. How does he know the geography of those areas with such technical accuracy? Is this the story of someone who was just sailing around out there that night, or is it the description of someone who knows the terrain with a suspicious level of depth? Then there's the practical side. Brian Hooker, heading out to sea on his own, has nothing to do with an official rescue operation. He's a man flagged as a suspect, returning to the scene, to the very waters that are the heart of the entire criminal investigation. Nobody knows, or at least it hasn't been officially confirmed, how authorities are monitoring him while he moves through the area. It's not clear whether he's coordinating with police, or what he's really trying to find out there. Total silence. But there's one more dimension to his behavior after leaving the jail cell that deserves cold psychological analysis. He chose to talk. He sat down in front of the CBS News microphones of his own free will, with no one forcing him. He floated theories about Lynette's survival, and demonstrated surgical knowledge of the local geography. He opened up his inner world, spoke about his feelings, his pain, and what he plans to do from now on. When a suspect ignores the basic legal advice to stay silent, and seeks out the cameras, he is making a deliberate, strategic move. It's a decision with many angles. Sometimes the defense believes the trial is won first in the mind of public opinion. If the theory is to sell a tragic accident, Brian has to seem like the devastated husband desperately searching for his wife. That's why these statements serve to cement his story. They're creating a record of innocence in front of the media. In front of the camera, he's building a consistent character. A frame of reference his attorneys will fall back on when the trial arrives. The problem is that speaking publicly also generates evidence. Everything is recorded. Everything is dissected under a forensic microscope. What he said about the maps, about human endurance, and about his private searches is already part of the official case file. If his words clash with the physical evidence or the data from the devices, those cracks in his story will be impossible to hide. That's why, in a case as dark as this one, every syllable spoken comes at a very high price. Police are listening, attorneys are running their calculations, and the community following the case isn't taking its eyes off him. From the first minute this investigation has moved, with almost obsessive attention to detail on the part of authorities. Let's look at where we really stand. The search at sea, and the criminal investigation are moving along separate but completely parallel paths. Shanta Knowles, commissioner of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, officially confirmed to NBC News that Brian Hooker remains on the list of suspects. That is the official position. No beating around the bush, straight from the top police authority on the island on the record. He is officially a suspect. His release did not clear him. The investigation is still humming, very active, with the U.S. Coast Guard leading a criminal inquiry. This is crucial and needs to be understood properly. The Coast Guard's law enforcement arm, which is separate from its rescue division, has jurisdiction over maritime crimes involving American citizens in certain international waters, and they're already working this case in depth. Their criminal investigation is coordinating with the Bahamas. It's not simply a passive observer role. We're talking about an active federal criminal investigation running parallel to the Bahamian one. They seized devices from Brian Hooker. Their exact nature hasn't been disclosed in public reports. But in maritime cases, the most decisive sources of electronic evidence include cell phones, GPS units, the boat's navigation computers, and any onboard communication equipment. Each one is a potential record of location, timing, communications, and patterns of behavior. In these crimes, digital data is the most lethal evidence for prosecutors. Technology doesn't lie. It doesn't have selective memory under stress. It records what happened, where and when, if it captured anything at all. Let's think about what that data might be revealing right now. A marine GPS present on almost any boat log's position at fixed intervals. That generates a history of location, exact time, speed, and the route taken. If the GPS places him in a location different from Brian Hooker's account, the inconsistency is brutal. If the log shows the boat stopped somewhere before the boatyard, that matters a lot. If it shows movements inconsistent with someone frantically searching for his wife, that's also critical. Similarly, an active cell phone generates location data through pings to cell towers and satellite records, even if the user isn't checking a map. Those records exist and are legally obtainable. Authorities are keeping tight-lipped about the basis for the arrest. We know there was probable cause simply because the arrest was carried out. What we don't know from the media is what specific evidence or information cemented that decision. That information is being kept under wraps. It's the standard in active criminal investigations with evidence collection underway. Multiple legal and investigative experts have been following this case closely. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer has spoken on the record with Newsweek. Former private investigator T.J. Ward has been monitoring every move in the file. Attorney Ron Marenfeld has provided maritime legal context. Eduardo Damas has analyzed the legal processes in the Bahamas. Karen Stark and Randy Kessler have also offered their own analytical perspectives. Darlene Hamlet is a constant presence in the media. The experts' landscape is consistent. This is a complex maritime criminal investigation. The evidentiary bar is extremely high. What the search turns up now will define the strength of the future criminal case against whoever is responsible. The investigation remains active. Brian Hooker is a named suspect. His electronic devices are now in the hands of investigators. The Coast Guard is running a parallel federal inquiry, and they have decided something in complete silence. Without announcing it, that completely changes the focus of what teams are looking for in the water. The shift from rescue to recovery. This is the most important moment of our coverage. We'll examine it carefully, because the implications run in every direction. They affect the search, the investigation, and the future of the case. The Royal Bahamas Police Force changed the official classification of the mission at sea. The mission went from being search and rescue to search and recovery. Let's be very precise here. These are not terms that can be swapped out lightly. They are operational designations with specific legal meanings. The distinction is not a matter of semantics. It is at its core a statement of what investigators believe. A rescue assumes the person is still alive. Resources are deployed with extreme urgency because time is the worst enemy. The goal is to find them before the window closes. Every hour is measured against survival. Going from search and rescue to recovery marks a definitive turn. It's not stopping. It's accepting that the reality has changed. Authorities are no longer working on the premise that Lynette Hooker can be found breathing. The mission now is to locate her remains. This change is never taken lightly in an at-sea operation. It's the result of a cold analysis of the window of survival considering time and water temperature. They weigh the extreme conditions and that total absence of any signs that the person is still alive. A point comes when operationally rescue no longer makes sense. The decision was made after 11 days of searching. They factored in the initial weather complications and the fact that they'd found the life ring, but with no trace of her. Jennifer Coffindaffer, a former FBI agent, was blunt about this in her statements to Newsweek. She said the chances of finding Lynette alive are in essence very remote. This is a credentialed federal expert speaking plainly about the near-zero probability of success. Language with no ambiguity. Very remote. And this is where the tragedy becomes directly intertwined with the ongoing criminal investigation. In suspected homicides, even when police believe they know what happened, and already have a suspect in their sights. Even with arrests and seized devices, the lack of a body represents a legal chasm for prosecutors. It's doable. There have been murder convictions in the United States and other countries without recovering the body. Experts call these no-body murder cases, and they rank among the hardest to win. The reason is simple. Without physical remains, there's no detailed medical examiner's report. There is no confirmed cause of death. There is no documented evidence of violence or injuries. Without forensic material recovered from the body, a defense attorney has an argument with devastating weight. They haven't even proven she's dead. In this story, that argument shapes up as follows. Brian Hooker himself told CBS News he believes someone can survive for weeks adrift in the Bahamas. He described cays and sandbars as possible refuges. His public stance is that she could be alive. Without the body, without a clear autopsy, and without physical evidence of what she actually went through, that defense gains strength. It's the same wall that stops convictions, even when investigators are certain about everything. That's why for those investigating, locating Lynette is not a side issue. It's the heart of the case. Everything is connected. A forensic expert examining her remains could finally determine the exact cause of her death. Any injuries, if they exist, would be documented. They would be facts, not theories. Any forensic trace on the body becomes direct ammunition for the prosecution to use at trial. There's also the question of what the location of the discovery will say about the nature of the event. If remains are found on a small cay, or if she turned up alive, as Brian insists, the investigation would completely change course. But if she appears at a site, or in a condition that contradicts his story of having fallen into the sea, that also becomes fundamental evidence. Where a body ends up depends on the currents, the drift, and the geography of the abacos. It's a vital piece of the reconstruction. Maritime forensic experts can decipher that data. Without it, justice will depend only on what police have managed to extract: data messages and calls, financial records, testimony, and contradictions in the account of events. Everything counts. They are powerful elements that have been enough in other trials, but the road is much harder without the body. By publicly insisting on the possibility that she is still alive, Brian Hooker is shielding his defense. He's planting that reasonable doubt that makes it so complex to secure a conviction in no-body cases. Every day that passes without Lynette Hooker is a day when the evidentiary landscape becomes more hostile. The teams now combing the cays and sandbars are not searching for a survivor. They're searching for evidence in the cays Brian described so carefully to CBS News. They're looking for evidence. They're putting the puzzle together. What they find and where they find it will define the course of justice. Whether anyone is held accountable for what happened to Lynette depends on it. What happens from here? Let's analyze the threads that will decide the future of this case, because several are moving at the same time. First, the search. The official effort continues, just as Commander Delavoye confirmed to the media. What the official teams find about Lynette in the coming days will be decisive for the future of the case. The geography that Brian Hooker described in his CBS News interview as potential survival zones coincides with the area rescuers are now combing. If she is on any of those land formations, sooner or later they're going to find her. The big question is, in what condition? What will the physical evidence reveal, and how much weight will it carry in a future formal indictment? The water is merciless. It doesn't preserve evidence forever. Time is running out. Second point, the devices. What can be extracted from the electronics seized from Brian Hooker could be the most devastating discovery of this entire criminal investigation. Location data from a marine GPS or a cell phone during the critical hours of that night could confirm his version or demolish it. They would show the exact route of the boat and what was happening on board. Messages and emails could finally reveal a motive. Any messaging app on his phone could bring to light previous plans or conversations that help explain what happened between the two of them. We don't know what those devices are hiding. Investigators do, and the urgency of their moves says a lot about their suspicions. Third, the witness factor. It's still up in the air whether there are key people the investigation has not yet revealed to the public. We're talking about people who were in the marina that night, sailors anchored in protected waters, or people who were on the nearby quays. Maybe they saw or heard something relevant between the night of April 4th and the early morning of April 5th. Marine anchorages are small communities. People know their neighbors' boats. They notice when someone pulls in alone at 4 in the morning. If there are witnesses who saw something that night and are still keeping quiet, the current media pressure could change their decision. Public interest sometimes pushes people with questionable information to step forward. Fourth, the dual legal track. This process involves both the Bahamian authorities and the U.S. federal government through the Coast Guard. How both fronts coordinate whether there will be parallel legal actions and under which jurisdiction the trial will be held, that's all complex. These are questions of enormous weight for the final resolution of this mystery. A prosecution in the Bahamas and a federal one in the United States operate under completely different rules of evidence and charging structures. Their consequences are also different. Fifth point, the family. Carly Allsworth, Lynette's daughter, was the one who received that voicemail. She has been a constant figure in public coverage of the case. Families in these situations often have civil legal options. Those proceedings move on their own track, regardless of what happens in criminal court. We'll be paying close attention to any developments on that front. And there's one final detail we want you to consider before closing out today. Brian Hooker told CBS News he just can't. He said he can't simply ignore this. He firmly believes she could be out there on some island or sandbar, somewhere in that maze of land dotting the Abaco waters. But the Bahamian police have a very different view. They changed the nature of the mission from rescue to recovery. They are no longer searching for a survivor. The flotation device Brian Hooker says he threw to his wife returned to shore. She did not. What emerges now in the water from those seized devices, or from the mouths of witnesses who may have already spoken with police? Through the legal gears of the Bahamas and the United States, the missing answers may finally arrive. It could be the definitive answer to every question this community has been asking since the sun came up on April 5th. That sunrise, when Lynette Hooker was no longer there. We are not letting go of this case. Every development verified and confirmed by our sources will make sure you know about it right away. If you've been with us from the start and want to go back over the details of the case, you can watch our previous reports. This audience doesn't miss the details, and the context from those videos is the foundation for understanding what we'll report going forward. There are several fronts we'll be watching any development from Bahamian authorities about the search operation at sea. Any leak or data about what was found on the electronics seized from Brian Hooker. Any sign of movement toward formal charges, whether in the Bahamian legal system or through U.S. federal justice. New accounts from possible witnesses in the marina area or on the water. And of course, any official report about finding Lynette. This case is not going to fade into oblivion. The investigation is still alive, and the search is not stopping. The world is watching, and so are those responsible for making sure justice is done. Investigators in the Bahamas and U.S. Coast Guard agents are working on this right now. The prosecutors who will eventually decide the direction of the case know full well that the public eye is on them. We will follow the trail of evidence closely, as forensic teams from both countries process every finding. Every development that's verified and cross-checked, we'll bring it to you as this criminal investigation runs its course. If this analysis has given you some clarity, I ask one thing of you. Subscribe. Turn on the notification bell right now. The exact moment a new piece of this puzzle surfaces, and believe me, it will, you'll want to be here to see it. Share your theories and analysis in the comments. Honestly, the clarity this community has shown on the case from day one surpasses any expectation. We review every word you write. Every lead and every question is analyzed rigorously. We'll be back as soon as we have verified information to share. The content of this video is strictly for informational and educational purposes, nothing more. The information presented here is based exclusively on public reports from identified official sources current as of today. Brian Hooker has regained his freedom. His legal representative, Terrell Butler, was emphatic. His client denies any kind of participation in the events. Hooker has not been convicted of any crime. In this space, we do not declare the guilt of any individual. The law is clear. As of this publication, there is no official confirmation of Lynette Hooker's death. It remains an open question. Bahamian authorities and U.S. federal authorities are keeping the case open. We do not dress up speculation here as if it were absolute truth. Every analytical inference is duly flagged. The details surrounding Lynette Hooker's disappearance are constantly evolving minute by minute. We will keep reporting. The moment confirmed data from solid sources emerges, we will update this report immediately. If you have any information that could shed light on the whereabouts or disappearance of Lynette Hooker, no matter how small, please contact the Royal Bahamas Police Force or the United States Coast Guard directly.